Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. Today I will be talking about a book which is slightly unusual. It's a book called Editor Editor Unplugged by Vinod Mehta. This book came out in 2014 and it was a follow-up to the memoir that he wrote, uh, which was called Lucknow Boy, which came out in 2011. So before I get into the book, I would like to talk about Vinod Mehta. Those of you who may not know him, well, he is a well-known Indian journalist. He worked from early 1970s to 2015 when he passed away. And he edited, among other publications, he edited Outlook magazine and before that Pioneer newspaper. And he has a lightness of touch, a style of writing which is interesting and readable, and he does not take himself too seriously. uh, so this book was a result of the success of Lucknow Boy, because that book did very well, and publisher thought that there could be a follow up there. So the story of Vinod Mehta uh, was told in Lucknow Boy. He told his own story. It's a memoir of his growing up years in Lucknow and his working life. And then, because the book was so successful, publishers requested him to write another uh, sequel, so to say. Initially, he was not very keen, but then the publisher persisted, and he decided to make a or write a book, a sequel, so to say. So that's a sequel. So before I get into this book in some detail, I'll talk about Vinod Mehta. He was born in 1945 and he died in 2015 at the age of 70. So he was born in Lucknow. Uh, he was not a great student. He studied at La Martiniere School of Lucknow, which is quite popular. And then did his graduation from Lucknow University. And then, sometime in the early 60s, after doing his graduation, he went to England, uh, and he did odd jobs there for a few years. And then he decided to come to India. He landed back in Bombay in the early 70s, and he had the vision of being a writer. And this was a different India at that time. So he landed in Bombay. As luck would have it, this was 1972. On 31st March 1972, Meena Kumari, the legendary actress, she passed away. So uh, and when she passed away, it was the nation was in grief. There was news coverage. Pakiza movie, which had released in February, just a month before her death, and was not doing very well, became a blockbuster. Everybody was talking about Meena Kumari, and Vinod Mehta thought, okay, there is no book on Meena Kumari, not at least in English. So he thought, I will go ahead and write her biography. It seemed like a foolish enterprise, but somehow he succeeded. He met people, he interviewed people, and thank God he wrote that biography, because that book is still in publication. You can buy it on Amazon. It's called Meena Kumari, a biography by Vinod Mehta. And interesting thing is that because everything was so recent, he met a lot of people, he interviewed people, and he gave a very interesting, light-hearted biography, uh, also mentioning a lot of controversial things. I'm surprised that there is not much talk about that book, but he wrote a lot of scandalous things in that book. And later on, he wrote a biography of Sanjay Gandhi. That was around 1980. So he worked on the book. The book was published, and then somebody who wanted to be a writer, he ended up becoming an editor of a newly launched magazine. The magazine was launched in 1974. The magazine was Debonair. Those of you who may not know the magazine, Debonair was India's answer to Playboy magazine. So he had a mix of interesting articles, book reviews, features, plus centerfold nudes. And in India, it was a big deal at that time, having an Indian woman posing topless in a magazine and her face showing, right? It was a big deal. So uh, The magazine took off. It had its problems. One problem was getting models for centerfold. Which Indian girl would want to pose topless in a magazine in the mid 70s? But they managed. They would depend on some travelers coming to India. They would probably sometimes get the girlfriend of the photographer, or sometimes a call girl or a prostitute. So they somehow managed, and they maintained a decent editorial. So you had some of the best writers writing for the magazine. So from Dom Moraes to Khushwant Singh to Adil Jusawala, the poet, everyone was contributing. So the magazine's editorial was high quality, and but it always evoked a smirk on people's face when they heard the name Debonair. So the magazine was a decent success, and by early 80s, Vinod Mehta took up the editorship of Sunday Observer, India's first proper weekly newspaper. So he left Debonair and started the Sunday Observer. Those who do not, who have not read the Sunday Observer, you probably cannot understand, or imagine the impact that paper had. This is before internet, before social media. So on a Sunday morning, the newspaper wala will deliver Sunday Observer, and you would get, this was your window to the world, to India and to the world. You would have all kinds of interesting articles, book reviews, features, comics, lots of things. So it was like a feast. I remember in the late 80s looking forward to Sunday mornings, because Sunday Observer would be delivered by the newspaper wala. So it was that impactful. So he continued and with Sunday Observer till late 80s, and then he got into controversy, a full-blown controversy, when he was working with Vijaypat Singhania of Raymond, who had launched a newspaper, Indian Post in Bombay, and they carried a story which was controversial. I won't repeat the story. You can read the book. Within a few months of launching Indian Post, the newspaper shut down, and Vinod Mehta was without a job. Then he resurfaced in Delhi, where another industrialist, Mr. Lalit Mohan Thapar, had acquired the Pioneer, which was a paper Rudyard Kipling had founded in Allahabad in the British India's time. The paper was going nowhere. Mr. Thapar got the paper, acquired the paper, and launched a Delhi edition. And Vinod Mehta was the editor. So Vinod Mehta has a certain way or style of editing. He would look at the presentation of the print. So the newspaper that he worked on were always very well designed. The articles are of very good quality. There is a lightness of touch and readability. And Mr. Vinod Mehta does not take himself very seriously. So that's a great help. So the Pioneer paper was going fine, and then sometime around 95, there was a problem between the editor and the proprietor, which is Vinod Mehta and Mr. Thapar. And Vinod Mehta found himself without a job, and he was wondering what to do. And then, as luck would have it, he was offered the editorship of a new, about to be launched magazine, weekly magazine called Outlook by Rajan Raheja. And he took up the offer and launched Outlook magazine, I think sometime in October 95, if memory serves me right. And then continued as the editor till he retired, so to say. I mean, he was still the editorial director of Outlook magazine when he passed away in 2015. So that, in a nutshell, is the story of Vinod Mehta. Um, so let's now get into the book. So this book has got chapters. The interesting ones are the one on Neera Radia. Neera Radia was, those who do not know her, which will be surprising because most people know her. So she was a public relation professional and a lobbyist who rose to prominence sometime around 2008 and 9. Her firm called Vaishnavi Communication was handling the business, the public relation business of Tata Group. So So the chapters in the book are devoted to Neera Radia tapes. I'll come to that. then about the ownership of media by business people, then this thing about Indians and our lack of sense of humor, then his impressions of different politicians he has met. There's a very interesting chapter on Arvind Kejriwal. Now, that was written in 2014, but it makes very interesting reading in 2024. So, and I won't talk about that chapter. If you read the book, you will probably enjoy that chapter. So, coming back to Neera Adia, what happened was that in 2010, Outlook magazine carried the transcript of Neera Adia's conversations with um, politicians, bureaucrats, journalists, and business people. And the crux of those tapes, the transcripts, was that she was manipulating government policy, she was influencing government policy, she was manipulating the appointment of bureaucrats, she was even thinking of changing ministers, and when she was talking to journalists, Barkha Dutt and Veer Sanghvi's names were prominent, and the transcript of her conversations with them were reproduced in the magazine. So, and the thing is that Indian middle class is very. So the Neera Radia tapes caused a lot of controversies, a major furor. No other publication had carried it. Only Outlook did that. So Hindustan Times, Times of India, they all decided not to carry it. So when he was asked about this, Vinod Mehta replied that he knew it was controversial, and he knew that it would cause a lot of furor and a bit of destabilization of the government, but he decided to do it in the larger interest of the society and the country. So it's a debatable point. I think he did the right thing. So this episode, in a way, started the downfall of Barkha Dutt, who I think is a fine journalist. She has her heart in the right place, and she has done amazing journalism over the last more than 20 years. But such is life. You know, you make one mistake and you are crucified for it. Anyway, so this episode also caused a big problem for Outlook Group, because Tata Group of companies immediately put a ban on advertising in Outlook magazine, which impacted the revenues of the group, and it led to a lot of problems. So Vinod Mehta has got one more chapter about Ratan Tata and uh, his efforts to say sorry to him. And Tata Group launched a case against Outlook and Vinod Mehta, which dragged on for years. Vinod Mehta wanted to reach out and make amends. He says in the book that he wanted to meet Ratan Tata. He tried to approach him through many people who were working with Ratan Tata, but it did not succeed. Also, I think we forget that Ratan Tata is a businessman. He may be a good businessman, but he's a businessman, so he has got his compulsions. He has to run a business, and at times he has to do things which may seem bordering unethical, which is the case in this particular episode. But he is a businessman, so you have to kind of keep that in mind. We Indians tend to put people on pedestal very easily and very quickly, and then we also drag them down from the pedestal. So it's a problem not with the person, it's a problem with us as a society, that we just want to worship everything. We want our heroes to be gods, and that is not how real life is. But anyway, moving on to the next chapter. So there's a very long chapter on ownership of media. Should business houses own media? Does it take away from the freedom of the press? Do editors have to then be careful of the business interest of the owner? It's a debate that's been going on for decades, and there is no clear answer for this. But Vinod Mehta has certain points which he makes, and you will probably enjoy reading that. Then there is a chapter on people that he admires, and it's a very interesting mix. So there are six people he has picked up that he admires, and very unusual choice. So there is Khwaja Ahmad Abbas, the writer and film producer. So Khwaja Ahmad Abbas was active from 1940s to 1980s, and he wrote scripts for films that Raj Kapoor directed, from Shri 420, Mera Naam Joker, Sangam, Bobby. So he was a well-known writer, but he was also a producer who was making films with a social cause. He was a communist. He would make films which had a social message. So all the money that he made from the movies that he wrote for Raj Kapoor, he invested in the films that he produced, and promptly lost all the money. Uh, but he is known as somebody who gave the first break to Amitabh Bachchan in his movie Saath Hindustani. So there's a longish chapter on Khwaja Ahmad Abbas, and you can see that Vinod Mehta really admires the man because he was a man of conviction. He was a communist. He had a vision of India, and he lived a very simple life. Interestingly, this might surprise people that when Khwaja Ahmad Abbas produced movies and directed movies, on his set, everyone was equal. So if you were a film star, the lead actor, or a light boy, you got the same food, you got the same treatment. You lived in the same, if it was an outdoor, you lived in the same room. So that is interesting. I mean, that would be unheard of in today's time. So Khwaja Ahmad Abbas, then he talks about Sachin Tendulkar in great detail. He talks about Kushwant Singh. He talks about Johnny Walker, the comedian, which is an interesting choice. And he has got what else? He has got, I think, two more names. I will just kind of look at that. So he has got these pen portraits of these people, interesting pen portraits, enjoyable read. And then he has this a nice chapter on do Indians lack a sense of humor. So Vinod Mehta got into trouble because he was always very forthright, and he was always puncturing egos, and he had a nice funny way of putting things. So he was always in controversy, and he did not take himself too lightly, which I think is a great quality. And yeah, in this chapter there's a joke which I think is very funny because this book came out in 2014, and the joke is relevant even today. So the joke goes that there's a very rich Arab man traveling on a flight from Middle East to India. So on the flight, the air hostess that is serving him, she's extremely beautiful. So the Arab sheikh, you know, gets carried away. He goes to the pilot and he says, "Ki, I want to buy this air hostess." So the pilot says that you cannot buy the air hostess. She belongs to this plane. So he says, "Ki, I want to buy the plane." So pilot says, "You can't buy the plane because this belongs to Air India." So Sheikh says, "Okay, I will buy Air India." So the pilot says, "You can't buy Air India. It belongs to Government of India." So the Sheikh says, "Then I will buy Government of India." So pilot says, "You can't buy Government of India because it is already sold to Mr. Ambani." So this joke was in 2014. It's relevant even today. So yeah, then there is a chapter which I really enjoyed. 2014 was the early days of these debates on television. That's where this entire disease started of prime time debates. So Vinod Mehta would be featured. So he would be featured there, and he would make fun of things. He would not take himself lightly. He would sometimes make outrageous statements, and he would always, because it was telecast on prime time and he was sitting at his home through a video link, he always had a glass of whiskey in his hand and he would be drinking. So there was a lot of talk about he being a debauched man, uh, being a drunkard. We Indians typically tend to form judgments very fast. So he has a lot of things to say about these debates on television. And yes, there's one chapter which I really enjoyed, which is on Kejriwal. Kejriwal was an interesting phenomenon back in 2013-14. He had just come to prominence. Now that we have seen him in the last 10 years, this profile of Kejriwal, which was written in 2014, seems very, very interesting. And I think you would enjoy reading it. So yeah, it's a readable book, and it was a book that was on my iPad for many, many months, and I had not got around to reading it. Interestingly enough, the moment I opened it and I read the first page, I finished the book in 2 days. So that's, I think, a great quality that Vinod Mehta had of writing lightly, saying a lot of important things, but saying it in a way that is very readable, and it is like a page turner. So yeah, you can read this book and you can read also Lucknow Boy, which I will review probably in one of my episodes. I'll record it maybe next week. That is also a lot of interesting stuff there. So yeah, that was my review of Vinod Mehta. I would fondly remember him as a guy who also introduced Debonair magazine in India. Those who grew up in India in the 80s and 90s would have fond memories of the magazine. Sometimes they would probably be hiding the magazine at home. But yeah, it was a very interesting experiment. And in this day and age, when there is social media and digital, to look back on a person who spent his entire life in print makes for a nice nostalgic read. So yeah, please read it and yeah, tell me in comments about if you have read Sunday Observer in the 80s and Pioneer in the 90s. What do you think? And by the way, I have been an Outlook reader since 95 when it started till recently. So yeah, so thank you very much for watching this episode. I'll bring you more reviews and I will be uploading them much faster. Thank you.